We are blessed. And here we are on a Sunday, September 11th. September 11th, 2001, I'm sure each of you can remember exactly where you were and what you were doing when you got the news about those two planes flying into the Twin Towers in New York City. If you were alive during the assassination of John F. Kennedy or Martin Luther King, you also knew exactly where you were at those moments that you heard the news. These are things that are etched into our psyche. And for me, I remember where I was and exactly what I was doing. I was living in Florida, and I had a friend who was also an ex-New Yorker living in Florida, and he gave me a buzz, and he was like, "Can you believe what's happening?" And I didn't know. And I turned on the TV, and it was almost like I was watching a movie, of like a sci-fi movie of the end of times or something, and they had this like special effects. I couldn't believe it. The Twin Towers, the World Trade Center, used to be one of my playgrounds when I lived in New York City. I had dates there. I had meals with friends there. I shopped there. I had been to the observation deck so many times, I can't tell you how many there were. Because, of course, when people come to New York, you're the tour guide. My dad also worked there at one time. Not when the towers came down, thank goodness, but he worked there. So I had really lived and breathed this location. And I was just shocked. I remember just the shock and not really wanting to believe it. And then when it sunk in a little bit, I got really angry. And I know people across the nation got angry. And that's normal. And when we have that anger, what do we want to do? We want revenge. We want to blame. Yes. Somebody needs to pay for this injustice. And our leaders at the time decided how they were going to seek justice was to have a war on terrorism. A war on terrorism. Almost 3,000 people died at the World Trade Center. Over 6,000 U.S. troops died in the war on terror. Over 1 million people died in Iraq. Half of those children, most of those civilians. And if you calculate then the Afghanistan and everywhere else that we want, that brings that figure up to 1.7 million people died. Because we wanted revenge. We wanted revenge. This was to stop terrorism. Do you feel safer now? No, because imagine yourself being the mother of one of those babies being killed by a bomb that has US on it. Imagine being a child and holding your parent as they are dying in your arms. What did we do? We fueled and inflamed much more anger. What we needed at that time is for our leaders to be able to breathe and sink into their wisdom and their knowing of truth. That's what we needed. Because when we are able to breathe, we're able to acknowledge that, yes, it is human nature to be angry, to blame, and to get revenge. And yet, there is a higher truth. Because when we breathe, we're able to ask the questions, such as, was there anything that could have prevented 9/11? Who were these people, and why were they so desperate that they felt that this was the only recourse they had, was to take lives? We could ask the questions, what is the USA's foreign policy in the Middle East? Some pundits have suggested that our economical and military support of Israel and the dictators that are in that region were contributing factors. Were contributing factors. So hopefully we've learned from our lesson. Have we? When we look around today? There's a lot of blame and anger going on today in our culture. We have folks that are struggling economically here in the U.S. So they're angry, and when they're angry, they look to blame someone. And the easiest targets to blame are those who do not look like they look, behave like they behave, or believe like they believe. And then our politicians come in, and what do? They feed that fire, don't they? Right? So there's all this blame that's being tossed around at the immigrants who are coming in and taking their jobs. Well, that's a really simplified answer, isn't it? What about the global systems that they have put in place that took so many jobs offshore? And so when that fuel is fired, it gets larger. It becomes much more hate-filled. And so then we have intolerance. Intolerance of other people's color. Intolerance of different nationalities. Intolerance of other sexual orientation. And there's a quote by Dr. Martin Luther King that says, "Darkness cannot be driven out with darkness. Only light can do that. Hatred cannot be driven out with hatred. Only love can do that." So we've taken the path of hatred, of seeking revenge and justice. And I'm here to tell you that we are at a turning point. I believe as we evolve in consciousness, these things have to bubble up. They have to bubble up to the surface. As I've been talking about us as individuals, we talk about integrating our shadows, yes? And we integrate those shadows for wholeness, is that correct? Pretend that I did talk about it. You can say yes. Yeah. And the same thing happens on a collective conscious. The same thing. So the shadows are coming up. In the U.S., we are steeped in shadows that we don't talk about. The shadows of slavery. The shadows of unequal rights. The shadows of indentured servitude. There are shadows that must come to the surface for us to look at, for us to push light to, and for us to integrate as a whole. But I believe even through all of this, love is the answer. We've even seen it just really at 9/11 in 2001. There were stories of love. Remember all those planes that were coming from Europe to the US, and then the airspace was closed? Those planes got diverted. And a lot of them got diverted to this little community called Gander in Newfoundland. The people coming in were larger than the community that they were coming into. These folks opened their hearts. They created shelters. They created food for them. They allowed them into their homes. They loved them. To the point where there are Americans that have created scholarships for their children who go back to connect and hold those loving relationships. There have been cases of love where people risk their own lives to help others to get out of the tower in time before it fell. There are those service people, men and women, police, firefighters, security, who helped guide out thousands of people and lost their own lives. That's love. That's powerful love. And I believe love is what will transform 9/11 in our psyche. That in 9/11, instead of equating it to this horrific tragedy, we get the choice to realize our oneness with each and every person on this planet. Our oneness to be able to feed our family and clothe our families. Our oneness in being able to believe whatever it is that we believe. Our oneness in that love is what cures hate. We can rewrite this script. It's really up to us. Did you know that this day is now a federal service day? So it's where people are encouraged to volunteer. And it started to volunteer to assist those who had survived, or like the first responders of 9/11. And it's evolved where it's just service to help others. So that's what 9/11 is recognized as. It started where people wrote cards to the troops, to police and firefighters, where they assisted veterans. And now it has morphed into so much more. People feed the homeless. They come up with creative ways of paying it forward. All of this is love. So in my mind, love is the cure for hate. And I come to that conclusion because of all of those demonstrated acts of kindness and love and how it has turned lives around. That's our legacy from 9/11. Take a moment to get comfortable in your seats as you prepare for meditation. Allow the chair to support you. Allow your feet to be grounded. And then, when you're ready, you may close your eyes if that's comfortable for you. And let's take that deep breath together. Inhale. Hold it. And release. Exhale. One more time. Deep inhale. Together. And now a hard push out as we let go. We take this time to be still. We take this time to go within. We take this time for gratitude. Gratitude for all the blessings, for all the people who have come in our lives, maybe forever, maybe for a short time. But in all of that, we know that they have blessed us. And now take a moment and think about one person who you feel did you wrong. They may have broken your heart. They may have severed a relationship. They may have cheated you financially. They may have cheated on you in a relationship. Whatever hurt that brings that person to your mind, see their face in your mind's eye and look at them. Look at them from new eyes, from a new lens. A lens in which you can see their divinity. A lens in which you can see they didn't remember the truth of what they are at that time. That you're able to see they learned those behaviors from what was done to them. They didn't know. And look at them again. From your own place of divinity, from your own knowing of compassion and forgiveness. You have this opportunity to release them from the burden that you carry. You have an opportunity to lighten your load by releasing this one person who has harmed you in some way. You have the opportunity to bless them as you take a moment in the silence. Take a moment to thank them. And take a moment to release them on their journey. And take a moment to forgive yourself. And take a deep breath together. Inhale. And exhale. Allow yourselves to bring your awareness to this sanctuary. Your awareness to the chairs, to the person breathing next to you. And when you feel comfortable, you may open your eyes and know that you have been changed on a molecular level. You have been changed.